Welcome into episode 401 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin, wearing his vintage Montreal Expos hat. Scott, first of all, love the hat, love the colors, great logo, great uniforms. It's a shame that Montreal doesn't have a baseball team anymore, but the Expos, they look good when they were out there on the diamond.
Yeah, I think they are like one of the markets that's been rumored for a while for either expansion or relocation. If Major League Baseball has like a new city, I know that there's a bunch, so I don't know if they'd actually get it, but they've been interested. But yeah, I've always loved the logo, and I liked when Montreal had a team, and obviously, just generally, just wearing this as like a celebration of the city of Montreal currently hosting Four Nations. Not taking international sides here. We know I'm Team USA, but
Mhm.
Well, I've been texting. I'm so jealous. I'm having such FOMO. I've been texting all my friends that are there. I've been like all the other reporters that are there. I'm like, is it as fun as it looks? Like they're like,
I mean,
even better actually. I'm like, damn.
Saturday night, Canada USA at the Bell Center is going to be unreal.
I'm so jealous. I have a broadcast that day, and I have one today too. So we couldn't go, and I'm just sitting here watching it on TV, going, I'm missing out. But we're gonna get it next week, so.
Absolutely. No, I think this tournament has been great. I love imagining like all the U.S. fans driving around wherever they're from with their Dunkin' Donuts, listening to NHL radio, and Canadian fans driving around Quebec and Ontario and Manitoba and Alberta with their Tim Hortons, and everybody's just looking forward to this clash that we'll get soon enough. But I do want to talk about Four Nations, and that's where we're going to start with our opening shifts, because Bridget and Scott, I've been.
First, we should mention we're doing a mailbag. I think people see it in the title, but we'll get to that.
This will be predominantly mailbag. That is correct. So thank you all for sending your questions. We'll get to as many, if not all of them, throughout this episode. So Four Nations, I've been looking forward to this tournament since it was announced, and the biggest reason is because of the void that has been international best on best hockey for almost a decade now, which is crazy because World Cup of Hockey in 2016, it's been that long. Obviously, it's not a full tournament of best on best, but I was still very much looking forward to it. And I was telling you guys before the episode started recording that World Cup of Hockey tournament in 2016 was right at the tail end of the previous era of U.S. hockey, where Jack Eichel, Auston Matthews, they were on Team North America. Jack Hughes hadn't yet been drafted. Like, there was this next wave of U.S. hockey that everybody knew was going to be incredible, but they just weren't at that age yet. And then we get this absence of international hockey best on best for almost the next decade. And so here we are. And I never understood a lot of the shade and pessimism that this tournament was getting leading into it from a lot of individuals questioning the intensity level that it was going to be, saying that it was going to be gimmicky and it was nothing more than a glorified all-star tournament. And it's like, I just think people haven't seen international best on best hockey in so long, they forgot just how much pride these players have. When they put on their nation's sweater, they are going to go 500%. And that is exactly what this tournament has been so far through two games. It has been incredible. And I think that is unanimous across the board. People who expected it to be amazing and those who were doubtful. And I think everybody's on the same page now through two games that this hockey is amazing. The only thing that you notice is that all of these players are still they're not teammates ordinarily. So that instant chemistry, sometimes you see they're feeling each other out as teammates, and there's a little bit of maybe hesitancy in the game at times, but that's going to rectify as the tournament goes along. But the intensity has been there right off of the bat. And it started with Canada with a 4-3 overtime game over against Sweden. And then Team USA and Finland in a very tight game through two periods, because that's how the Finns play despite their lack of talent compared to the US. And then the US takes over in a third and they win 6-1. So the standings currently are US at the top with 3 points, because that's what you get for a regulation win. Canada with 2 points, which you get for an overtime win. Sweden with 1 point, overtime loss. Finland, no points, regulation loss. And that's where we stand now. But what a start it's been to this tournament.
Yeah, which is the college hockey format, right? So like for me, this is like the normal format for Hockey East. I'm like, I know this one. This one's good. But yeah, Scott, you go first.
Should be the NHL format too. I've felt this for years, but would strongly support the NHL going to a true 3-point format. My opening shift is also Four Nations related, but just wanted to touch on the three Bruins who have played. Jeremy Swayman obviously did not play. Connor Hellebuck started for the U.S. I don't anticipate Swayman playing at all. He's the third string goalie.
Scott, I think I saw Swayman tweet out a picture before the game from the balcony saying popcorn time.
That's right.
That's his role in this tournament.
He knows what's up. Yeah. But Charlie McAvoy for the U.S., Brad Marchand for Canada, Elias Lindholm for Sweden did all play. McAvoy had the biggest role in the sense that he got 1945 time on ice, was on really what I think was the United States top pairing with Zach Werenski. They got the most minutes. I think they played the best. Mike Sullivan actually changed up the other two pairings because I thought the third pairing of Noah Hannafin and Brock Faber in particular kind of struggled a bit. Didn't think Adam Fox had a great game either. But McAvoy played well. It was a +2. He breaks up an entry at the blue line that set up the fourth USA goal early in the third period that came just 11 seconds after they had made it 3-1. Was a big part of the penalty kill, which went 2 for 2. Marchand scored for Canada, so obviously a big contribution there. He had the goal that made it 2-0. Finishing off an odd man rush and a nice pass from Braden Point, but also had the back check in the neutral zone that kind of helped create that chance and force the turnover. And, Marchand ended up playing, I think, just under 11 minutes. Same with Elias Lindholm over on the Sweden side. They're both in bottom six roles. I thought Elias Lindholm played pretty well, though. Like, not the most noticeable game, which, is unfortunately, like, we've kind of been able to say that plenty about him in Boston this season. He hasn't been the most noticeable. But he's in a checking role on Sweden. And I thought it was notable that Sweden had last change in that game. And early on, Elias Lindholm's line was getting used against Canada's bottom six, third, fourth line. As the game went on, Sweden started to use Elias Lindholm's line more against Canada's top six. So against the likes of McKinnon, McDavid, Crosby. And they did actually help kind of slow them down and help make a comeback possible for Sweden, where some of their top guys got freed up a little, and they ultimately forced that game to overtime. So I think not a role to be ignored, even if it wasn't the most noticeable in the box score.
Yeah, and I mean, Marchand did get booed when he touched the puck in the first period a few times, even though he was on Team Canada. But then as soon as he scored, everybody, erupted for him because when, maybe he's won them over. Maybe he's not going to get booed next game, but
then even when they announced his name, though, there were still some boos. So.
Oh, 100%. Like early in the game, there was boos for him. Like people maybe just need to settle into the fact that he's on their team now. I don't know. Or
no, I don't think the boos are going to go away.
Well, I mean, if he scores important goals, then he had in the first game, maybe they'll let up. But it is funny to see who they boo the most. Like, I think they boo the Kachucks a lot. They boo Matthews. They boo anyone on the Bruins. Like, it's the rivals that, that they boo a lot. But anyway, my opening shift is that after watching those two first games, I cannot wait for US Canada. The first iteration of that is going to be Saturday. Like we mentioned off the top, it's going to be Saturday in Montreal. And I am hoping that we see it in Boston too for the championship game. It's not guaranteed what that's going to be, but I think everybody in the US and Canada is probably rooting for that as the final. And even though we're American, and US Finland final would be easier for them to win. I just need to see US Canada. That's what I would be paying money for. Luckily, we don't have to, but but that is the game that I cannot wait to see. Hopefully, for the tournament's sake, viewership's sake, and everybody in both countries, that's the matchup we get in the championship, because I want to see Marchand going against McAvoy. I want to see what are the two best teams in the tournament going at each other. And the kind of atmosphere that's going to be in Montreal is going to be insane. And I'm hoping we get the same kind of thing in Boston. It's going to be hard to compete with Canada, though. They just like hockey a little bit more, and that's just their main sport compared to us. But we're, I'm just hoping that we get a nice Canada US championship, and we're setting up for that, right? Both won. Canada got the 2 points, US got the 3, so you can feel good about that as an American. You're still in first place right now, but the setup so far, we're still early, is that as the matchup. And I find myself rooting for Canada because I'm like, that's the matchup I want. Except for when they play USA, I'm rooting for Canada. Like, I didn't realize I was going to, but like subconsciously, I'm over here like, oh yeah, good job, good job, And also, quick side note: Crosby MVP of the first game. Just saying.
Yeah, he was really good. One of my takeaways from that game was like, it is a shame that the Penguins are just wasting the twilight of his career, because he is still one of the best players in the world. Like,
yeah, people texting me, haters, they're like, "God, isn't he old?" I'm like, he's still the best player out there.
He could easily still be the number one center on a Stanley Cup team, like, without question. But Pittsburgh just keeps fumbling every move they make around him. It was like they try to keep the window alive, and then they try to retool, but that doesn't go great. So then they bring in a bunch of veterans, and like there's been no direction. There's been obviously an ownership change, management changes. Anyways,
speaking of that, Mario got a lot of cheers.
Oh yeah, well, yeah. I mean, he's
from Montreal.
He's more popular than, like, he's as popular in Montreal as like you could be anywhere, pretty much. I think. I was thinking, like, who will be the U.S. equivalent that they bring out, and it's probably Micah Ruzioni, like, especially in Boston, like, because I don't know if there's an NHL legend that would like align that perfectly, where they're from that country, that city, and like have that kind of connection. But like a Ruzioni would obviously be a great fit for Boston and USA.
I know who it's Don Sweeney and Cam Neely. They come out, they're gonna get big cheers. It's gonna be great. They're totally not gonna get booed. And also, I saw someone on Twitter say, Don Sweeney's gonna feel really confident coming out of this because he put together such a great team, a Canadian national team. It's like, that is the easiest thing to do. The salary on that team, like with no salary cap, like the salary on that team is just so above and beyond anything. It's like, yeah, okay, we'll just add the best player from every team. All right, yeah, no, that team's gonna be good.
Well, I also liked that they highlighted Bruce Cassidy coaching Canada's power play. Yep. And it's like talk about the easiest job in the world. It's like, all right, you're Connor McDavid. Okay, go be Connor McDavid. Nathan McKinnon, go be Nathan McKinnon. Like, what do you have to do? It's just like throw the puck out there and like go play, guys.
Yeah. I mean, they took him 10 seconds to score on the power play to start that first game, and it was
56 seconds to score in general. Just from the beginning, I was like, oh, this is going to be a runaway. But then when it wasn't, I was like, they showed a little bit of weakness. Now, could they just be getting to, the chemistry, and it's not quite there yet? I would argue that some of them, the chemistry looked like it was there right away. Crosby and everyone. Crosby was just making backhand passes, no look and whatnot. But
Bruce, are you a Crosby fan?
No. No. 15-year-old me was like the biggest Sidney Crosby fan that there ever was. Because my mom's side of the family is from Pennsylvania. I should mention that. But yeah, I was a huge Crosby fan. And I loved watching him in the Olympics. And I know he beat USA in Vancouver, but I I wasn't as sad as some of the other people. Just put it that way.
Bridget goes to every home game, sees the best players in the world 40 plus times a year. But every time Sid comes to town, she always posts a video or a picture of him warming up, and it's that 15-year-old version of her that she just
Yeah. It's never like, oh, McDavid's here. It's like, no, Sid's here.
There's Sid. There's Sid. Yeah, I mean, this tournament is cool for a lot of reasons. Number one, it's an appetizer for what is going to be international best on best hockey every 2 years going forward, as Marty Walsh and Gary Bettman made reference to at their pre-Canada Sweden press conference. And they announced the World Cup of Hockey in 2028, which will obviously be 2 years after the Olympics next February. And they plan on having obviously the Winter Olympics in 2030 and then World Cup in 32 and so on and so on. So this is a really good appetizer for that. Of course, this is the top 4 teams. Well, Russia would be a top 4 team on skill, but they aren't included right now. And they made reference to that. They said that's just beyond hockey. That's just politics. And essentially Russia will be back when it's politically correct. Well, I'll put it that way. And
I thought it was funny that I forget what commentator it was like, and Finland is definitely the number 5. Like they're just like, they're here, but they're definitely 5th. And I was like, that's a little bit blunt, but
well, and it also sucks. It sucks for Finland because it's like any chance they had, they're going to be the 4th team in this tournament no matter what. But they lost 3 of their starting defensemen to injury and like within 2 weeks leading up to this, and including Miro Heiskanen, who obviously would have been their number 1 defenseman and one of their very best players. And it's like, yeah, I know they grind and they always play a defensive style, and they kept it close with the U.S. through 2 periods, but they're just fighting such an uphill battle. When you look at like Nico Mikkola and Asa Lindell as their top pairing, and it's like, yeah, those are nice players. Like those are both solid second pairing guys in the NHL, but like they're just getting buried shift after shift by Austin Matthews and Jake Gensel and Matthew Tkachuk and Jack Eichel. And it's like, then they're going to go against Canada. And, they're at a certain point, like you're just overmatched.
I actually like the Finns forwards. I think their forward depth is pretty good. But yeah, I mean, when you have Urho Vakanainen, who Bruins fans are familiar with to an extent, as you're on your second D pair going up against 4 lines of just all-stars for US and Canada. And Sweden's forwards are good too. So it's tough. It's tough.
I had to explain to my father who Urho Vakanainen was, even though he was a Bruin. He's like, I don't remember him. I'm like, most people don't. That's and my dad's going, well, are these guys all NHLers? Like, do they have other, because obviously in a lot of the international tournaments, you're getting some people that play in those leagues, like the Czech Republic team has guys that play in in their pro leagues and in the KHL and stuff like that, but yeah.
I mean, when I see hockey like this, it really excites you for the Olympics and future World Cups.
I've already started looking for my Airbnb. So
yeah,
my Airbnb near Milan. I found out that and if you think I'm joking, I'm not. Lake Como is only a 35-minute drive from one of the rinks. And so I was like, that's pretty cool. I could see myself doing that. But yeah.
Yeah, but just watching these games, it just reminds you that international hockey, styles make fights, and you see what the DNA is of each nation, and that's why I'm looking forward to seeing more countries involved, because Canada's always been super highly skilled, and that's never deviated from them. I think historically they've just had more game breakers, and I think Finland has always been hardworking, defensively structured. Sweden has always been defensively structured as well, but they've also been really good offensively. But when I look at this USA hockey team, for me, it's like kind of a yearbook in high school. It's like most changed from freshman year to senior year. Like this hockey team right now, I think, is the most changed, because USA hockey has always been, that tier just below Canada, kind of on par with the Russians, depends on the year. And they've always had tremendous players. But I don't think there's ever been – it's been a long time since you've seen a U.S. hockey team with this many game breakers and just elite players. And there's so much more sandpaper to this USA hockey team in a game breaking sense, like the Kachuk brothers. And
They're on the same line now. Like they
yeah,
started out on different lines. They end up on the same line as there's always something that seems like it's about to boil over. But remember, like to anyone who maybe doesn't know the international rules, fighting not allowed in international hockey. So if one breaks out, there's going to be some suspensions.
but
Well,
not in
they
this
might-
tournament though, because it's
Yeah.
NHL sanctioned.
Oh,
Right.
really? I
NHL
figured they're
rules.
going by the full international. You can't fight.
NHL
maybe that's
rules. NHL rules, except for the point system, is what it seems like.
Right.
No, but overtime's different.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
It's more similar to the. I guess we have to look it up, but I thought
Yeah.
that if they fought, it would be suspensions. So
Well, I saw Wes
yeah, I don't
McCauley
know.
out there, so I was like, oh, it's the NHL refs out there.
Yeah, I don't know if they have like an official rule against fighting for the tournament. My guess is they're probably telling guys like, let's not do that. But I also don't think like they'd be suspending someone for the championship game if a fight broke out in the on Monday or something.
I challenge someone to fight someone, and so we can find out the answer. It's like, someone do it. Well, no.
Yeah, but I mean, as it relates to USA Hockey, like, not that I'm the first one to say, but yeah, it's like this is the best team USA Hockey has ever been able to assemble. It truly is like a golden age for American hockey, and you see that you've seen it building at other levels. Like the past decade, the US has had way more success at World Juniors than they've ever had before, and that's continuing now into like the next generation that just won back-to-back golds at World Juniors.
Well, and Leonard and Perot eventually will be, potentially joining those teams, and like Stiga and I'm not Stiga. There's plenty of guys that are going to be, in particular, Leonard is probably who I would think of as like the up and coming next generation of it.
Yeah, and like I'd seen something the other day that showed, how many Americans in the NHL over the years and versus how many Canadians in like other countries. And if the current trends continue, the US is going to pass Canada for most NHLs within the next 15 years. So like it's just been USA Hockey has just been on like this skyrocket trajectory.
The goalies at the
huge advantage. Yeah,
they're better. They're 100%. The U.S. goalies are the best goalies at that level. If you in college hockey and juniors, like those guys are a step ahead. I feel like Fowler for BC is great. There's a few really good goalies out like in the NCHC as well.
Trey Augustine at Michigan State.
Yep, exactly.
I mean, one of the things that Canada has always been able to say, and it's 100% true, is we are so good at hockey. Our top players are so good at hockey, and we have so many top players that we have enough top players for probably 2 gold medal rosters. We could probably ice 2 different Olympic teams. And I feel like USA Hockey, when you look at this USA Hockey roster, I mentioned the Kachuk brothers, and they bring their own elite dynamics of just agitation, sandpaper, and skill. But then you have the Austin Matthews and the Jack Hugheses and the Jack Eichels, where it's just immense pure skill and talent. But it's beyond the roster at 4 Nations. When you look at the NHL players that are Americans that didn't make this team, that could have been on this team, you could ice another team of Americans as well. I mean, so that to me is where you really start to notice, oh boy, like, yeah, the U.S. has arrived, and they're coming in waves because there are a lot of Americans in the NHL, and as Bridget mentioned with Ryan Leonard, that are still amateurs technically, that, I mean, so Matty Beniers, Clayton Keller, Logan Cooley. I mean, there's so many. I mean, there's a lot. I'm not going to list them all off, but there's a lot of defensemen that got cut off too. I mean, there's no John Carlson. I mean, so it's really impressive, and I'm really looking forward to. I'll say this. I think Canada has their hands full with U.S. hockey going forward in this tournament, the Olympics, and future World Cups, because they can beat you in any which way. They just won 6-1 albeit against a defensively beaten up Finland team. Did Jack Hughes score a goal? Austin Matthews, Jack Eichel, JT Miller. Did any of these guys score? Oh, no, but they still scored 6. They can do it in any way.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, talking about like chemistry, I thought like 2 guys who had it right off the get-go was Austin Matthews and Jack Hughes, who were connecting all over the place, creating chances, and just didn't get rewarded for it until the third period, until that line finally scored with Gensel finishing it off. But like, they were creating chances left and right, and I assume we'll continue to. And it's like, now you look at, feels like it took a game to figure out what the top 6 should be, but now you're like, all right, Gensel, Matthews, Hughes, chemistry, and then you end up with the Kachuk line, which they started the game with.
Seems like far too many Kachucks for most people. I mean, it's a lot of Kachucks.
It's miserable to go up against one Kachuk, never mind 2, as Finland learned. But yeah, the U.S. started the game with those 2, with the Kachuk brothers on different lines. Kachuk was up with Eichel. Brady Kachuk was lower in the lineup on the third line. And they got put together in the second period because it was a 1-1 game, and the U.S. needed a spark. It was kind of, like the U.S., you could tell, was the better team, but it was a dogfight. It was kind of a slog. And that change, along with a couple other changes, putting Werenski in the top power play unit instead of Adam Fox, like those changes really sparked them. And now you feel like the U.S. has a much better idea of how this lineup should be constructed going into the big Canada game.
Yeah, I think they called Mike Sullivan like the calm old man or whatever, like, because that's USA.
I think they were calling John Tortorella that, which they're like, that's not usually what he is, but that's his role here.
No, I thought they were talking about Mike Sullivan, because no one in their right mind would say that Tortorella was calm. I think he was like the crazy old man and the calm old man, and they like balance each other out.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, what's funny? I saw Sullivan and Bill Guerin next to each other at a press conference earlier this week, and it made me curious because Mike Sullivan still looks good for his age. Charlie McAvoy's father-in-law, by the way. And Billy Guerin, you could just tell he likes to sit back in the offseason these days because he's aged a little bit more than Sullivan. I think Bill Guerin's actually 2 years younger. But it got me thinking, because I knew Billy Guerin played for the Bruins back in between 2001 and 2003, and that's around when Mike Sullivan was coach. So I was curious if Mike Sullivan has been coaching for so long that he actually coached Bill Guerin with the Bruins, and now Bill Guerin's the GM of U.S. hockey in this tournament. But they didn't. Billy Guerin was in Dallas when Mike Sullivan took over as coach in Boston. But still, Sullivan was coaching in the league when Guerin was still playing. But as far as Werenski, Scott, I thought that's a look they would have gone with out of the gate, just because it's been a down year for Adam Fox, and I just like Werenski's size and skating mobility. Just he's a little smoother, more decisive, I feel like. And Adam Fox is great at what he does. But I thought that was something that they would do in the absence of, oh, by the way, arguably the best American hockey player on the planet right now, which is Quinn Hughes. And the U.S. is doing all this without him, and I can't wait to see him in future tournaments. But Quinn Hughes to the I almost said Boston Blue Line, to the American Blue Line is what Cale Makar is.
That would help fix a lot of problems.
Right? Is what Cale Makar is to the Canadian Blue Line. He's that good. And that's, something that the U.S. is going to have to battle through. But the Canadians are also without Shea Theodore, so injuries are a thing. Heiskanen for Finland, and so on and so on. One other element before the mailbag, guys, I wanted to mention that is really cool about these tournaments is seeing unusual teammates. You guys talked about Brad Marchand getting booed by the Canadian fans. Of course, when he scores, they cheer. So ultimately they show their cards when it matters most. But one thing I find really cool is unusual teammates getting along, having each other's back.
Like when a duck and a horse are friends.
Exactly. Because it's one thing to play for the team that pays you. The Boston Bruins, the Florida Panthers, the Ottawa Senators, but it's another thing to play for where you're from. And there was a play last night where Charlie McAvoy got cross-checked from behind it was a pretty dangerous play. I forget who it was on Finland, but cross-checked him from behind, and he kind of went shoulder neck first into the post, the left post of his net. And who do you see jumping right in there, throwing some rabbit punches to defend Charlie McAvoy, a Boston Bruin? Matthew Tkachuk, a Florida Panther, Brady Tkachuk, an Ottawa Senator, some Atlantic Division foes. Jack Eichel as well. But yeah, it makes sense because these kids, before they were division rivals in the NHL, were best friends in the national development program. And it's really cool to see international hockey because of these dynamics. And it's been so long, but this is one of the things I look forward to most as well, is just seeing these different dynamics play out. And it's really cool.
Yeah, it was Joel Armia who hit him from behind. So Montreal, Boston rivalry there. Yeah, I was also going to mention kind of along those lines. I think it was the NHL or maybe it was TNT or I don't know. But someone put out the mic'd up clip of Brad Marchand in the locker room after Canada's win. Marchand was mic'd up for the game, and you can tell like he just is totally embracing the like comedic relief role on this team because he just walks in and he's like, oh, "You guys are awesome to watch. I think I'm the biggest fan there is." And then he's like ribbing Crosby because he's like, pretty dangerous play going through the legs, and you're just kind of going for a skate. You're almost off sides, and like everyone's just kind of like, it had been like a pretty quiet room before he like walked in, even though they just won. And then it's like everyone's laughing. Like in a line, it's Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid, Marchand, Mitch Marner. So just funny seeing that.
Yeah, like he's one of the people who, even in serious situations, always is like doing stuff like that. Like, think about what McKinnon was like before the game when TNT interviewed him. He was so like stone cold, no emotion, like game face. Whereas if it was Marchand, he would have just been doing a back and forth, and it would have been all jokes. And I feel like the personalities are pretty like they're conservative in that they don't really push the limit very much. And then there's Marchand, who obviously that's his whole thing. Like that's just who he is.
Yeah.
I don't think you're stopping him. And apparently Jackie Redmond tweeted out that when he found out he was going to get interviewed by her and he did not like put the headset on and talk to Biz, he was upset. Like he was like, "Oh, fine, all right," because he wanted to go on there and jab him. I'm sure he's probably got material that he hasn't been able to use yet, and so yeah, like that's what he does.
So Bridget and Scott, after years now of watching the Bruins play the Maple Leafs in the playoffs and holding your breath every time Austin Matthews has the puck, and playing the Panthers in the playoffs and holding your breath every time Matthew Tkachuk has the puck, or how was the experience for you two last night watching these players and being on the other side of it and be like, "Come on, Matt, like, come on, Poppy, put it in. Come on, Matty." Poppy is what they call him in Austin Matthews in Toronto. I'm kind of joking, but
I will never say that.
I know Scott was. I know Scott was.
Boston only recognizes one Poppy, and it's not Austin Matthews. So.
Yeah, obviously I'm joking with those nicknames, but what was it like for you guys watching these players and being like hoping that their shots go in? It's again these dynamics that international hockey brings out is cheering for players that you aren't used to cheering for as a fan of one team.
I'm still not quite there yet.
That's okay. That's an honest answer. I mean,
I'm just rooting for Sidney Crosby.
Yeah.
Next.
Just rooting for individual players that I know. I'm getting there. All right.
It's awesome.
Goals yesterday, so like that's great, but I think I'm still getting there.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Like obviously I'm rooting for the US, and I think I kind of always expected them to like start to pull away from Finland at some point. I'm sure it'll ramp up more with Canada, where it's like the emotion level is going to be through the roof. Both for players, fans, everyone. But I think like the biggest thing for me is just like the joy of watching the very best players all together, playing with each other and against each other, and giving it their all, which is why I was so excited for this tournament, even though it's not perfect, and even though there's no Russia and there's no Czech Republic, and I get it, it's really only like an appetizer for the return to the Olympics next year. And yeah, there's never Four Nations isn't a brand name. Like all the things people are complaining about, I'm like, I just don't care because it's these great players who are going to be giving 110%, and it's going to be awesome when you actually sit down to watch it. And it is. And like, I still feel like I hear, maybe this is just listening to too much sports radio, but it's like, I still hear some people being jaded or kind of negative towards it. And I just have kind of gone to the point where I'm like, watch it or don't. Like, be a hockey fan or don't. Like, I don't really care. If you're a hockey fan, you're gonna watch it and you're gonna enjoy it. And if you're not a hockey fan and you don't want to watch it, then like fine, don't watch it. I don't, go do something else, but I'm gonna greatly enjoy this.
Well, you know what? We have our first episode of Sunday Skate this Sunday, and it's going to be immediately following US Canada.
Yeah.
So that's going to be pretty cool. And obviously, we're still going to talk Bruins, and we're probably about to transition into our mailbag, which is all Bruins questions. So yeah, we're going to get to that really soon. But yeah, like call us on Sunday if you want to talk about Four Nations or about the Bruins, because we're back on with, and Razor is calling in. He's away. Is he in Montreal right now? I know he has broadcasting duties during Four Nations for a Canadian station, I believe.
Yeah, I think, is it Sirius that he's doing games for?
Anyway, he's calling in for a segment. He won't be in studio with us, but he should be for most of the rest of the year up until the Bruins get eliminated or if they fail to make the playoffs. But yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, we can transition now to the mailbag. Obviously, we wanted to spend some time on Four Nations, and we're going to continue to do so, by the way, as long as this tournament is going on and the NHL is on recess. So for now, you all did send questions, and let's get right to them. So first of all, thank you for submitting. We always appreciate it. And why don't we start with some emails? The first one will go, and I'm just going to, for time, I'll probably just kind of paraphrase some of these, but from Liz, during the Four Nations, what do you think the Bruins do with Poitras? So we know this answer already. They did send him down to Providence. As it pertains to when he comes back, basically Liz is curious, why send Poitras down to Providence and risk injury when they're going to need him for the final 25 games? And Bridget Scott, we'll start with that part of the question, and you guys are feel free to answer.
Yeah, so we're recording this Friday morning, so I am going to be Poitras has been practicing with Providence. They have 3 games this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I am interested to see if he plays. I would not expect him to play all 3 games, even if he does. But, I'm sure that this is a plan, coordinated front office, coaches, training staff, Poitras himself. Like, they want to figure out what's best for him to do during this NHL break. And obviously they have the option of sending him down. They also sent down Mike Callahan, who also got some dental work done during this break. He still needed some follow-ups. Yeah, after getting, I think he said 3 teeth knocked out when he took a puck to the face.
Yep.
So, yeah, so it's a couple things. Like, there's arguments on both sides, obviously. One is, hey, Poitras's gotten banged up a bit. Could he just use the rest? Would that be best? But he's also a young kid who really needs to just play as much as possible. Like, just in general, the more game experience Matt Poitras gets at the professional level, whether that's NHL or AHL, the better. So I think the way you look at it is you take all of that into account and then figure out, all right, are we going to play him 2 games, 1 game, no games, but we're going to have him practice? And, to me, it's like, it's hard to criticize that. Like, I'm not trying to be wishy-washy, but it's hard for me to criticize that either way, because I don't know everything that Matt Poitras is dealing with. Like, I don't know if he's really banged up right now and could absolutely use the rest, or he's feeling pretty good, and in which case, like, there's no reason not to have him play games.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was the right thing to do to send him down, as long as they bring him back up at the end of this, right? Like, that is the main caveat. It's like, don't just be like, you know what, you stay down there, because I think they need him. And I think it's going to help him. Unfortunately for him, he doesn't get to go to the Bahamas this week, because some guys are taking the time and they're traveling and they're going somewhere warm, and he's in Providence, which is probably not where I would take my vacation during the break. But probably I say that because I live 15 minutes away from there. So
all of Federal Hill right now is like, oh, what do you mean?
I'll be there tonight. I'll be there in a few hours, because I got PCBU tonight. So Scott's gonna have to listen to me. Doesn't that stink, Scott?
Yeah, no, I gotta try to find some way to avoid it. But
but yeah,
no,
I think
I mean that should be a great series though.
I'm so
At
excited.
Providence tonight, at BU Saturday night.
Yep.
But another top 10 matchup.
By the way, Scott, congratulations on the Beanpot victory.
That's right.
We haven't talked about that.
Oh, we haven't talked about that yet? Oh.
I know, yeah, because we didn't do a midweek episode, but
That's right. Well, we'll be talking about it a lot on the PCBU broadcast tonight. And there's a chance I interview Macklin Celebrini tonight as well. If he's stuck around in town for a while. So if he's at the game, I'm gonna be interviewing him for next week's episode of This Week in Hockey East on Nesson. So that'll be good.
Yeah, just as a quick aside, like it's awesome that Macklin Celebrini and Lane Hudson, like who might finish 1-2 in what's the in Calder Trophy voting for Rookie of the Year.
No.
Well, yeah. also Hobie Baker if they were.
Is that really good?
The Calder?
Yeah, that's the Rookie of the Year, right? The Calder Trophy.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were talking about college hockey. My bad. You were talking about Macklin. Got it.
Like they're the two best rookies in the NHL right now, and they decided to spend their break by going back to BU and just hanging around all their old teammates. Now they both have brothers on the team, so that's obviously part of it. But they were at the Beanpot Monday night, and we're both in the student section with BU students for part of it. Macklin Celebrini was like waving the flag. I guess Lane Hudson did as well. So they are they're still living their best college lives, even though they're now in the NHL.
Yeah, except for for Macklin, he had to leave warm California to come to Boston, which is when this like really cold winter that we're having. And yeah, I'm over it, by the way, guys. Anyway, we can get back to the mailbag.
Okay, so quickly, Scott, maybe you can just answer this one. Liz had a follow-up about why the cap seems so different in the NHL than other sports as it pertains to constantly, sending guys up and down from the minors. Other professional sports, the NFL, for example, doesn't have a minor league system. I don't believe. I think it's just college football. NBA has the G League or the D League, whatever it's called. Baseball has AAA, but basically the cap gymnastics when it comes to sending people up and down, and is the NHL more extreme with that stuff?
Yeah, I mean they are, and like the most simplest explanation is that it's the only true hard cap league. There's a dollar number this year, 88 million, that you can't exceed. Period. In other leagues that have a cap, like the NBA, there's luxury taxes and there's the first apron and second apron, and there are ways to go over the cap, but you just pay more in taxes, and it gets very complicated. NFL, you can move money around. Contracts aren't guaranteed, so it's easier to maneuver. Baseball obviously doesn't have a salary cap. And as it relates specifically to like players going up and down, because Liz was asking about that, other leagues do have it. Like NHL or NFL rather, like every week you'll see practice squad transactions. Guys signed to the active roster, return to the practice squad. Baseball, you get call-ups and players sent up and down. NBA, you don't notice it, but like teams will bring in guys to be like the 12th player on the roster on a game night, call them up from the G League. Those guys just don't usually play, so you probably never notice. But yeah, I mean, with the NHL, it's just like that's just the nature of being a hard cap league. Is there's a number you have to be under, and there's also incentive to, you can also save more money by being further under it. So that's where you get like the funny paper transactions of sending guys up and down just for a day, even though they're not actually going to travel. So like that's part of it too. But yeah, that's what NHL owners want. Like that's what they locked out an entire season back in 04-05 to get a salary cap. So I would argue it's the biggest win, and I don't mean as a good thing. I just mean for what owners were fighting for that any pro league has had, and it was probably the biggest loss that any players association has had in my lifetime.
Yeah, when we all lost a season, and it was, We don't like to talk about that time.
Well, and players lost money.
Oh yeah.
Player salaries only like just now, the top end salaries are only just now getting to where they were before the 04 lockout. Like that's if you think about what it takes to just crush player salaries for 20 years, like pretty crazy that like that happened and the owners won like just by brute force, just got a massive financial win.
Yeah, and if you're watching hockey and you're like seeing the salaries of these guys and you're wondering why baseball players are making so much more even though their bodies are going through less, or in other sports, basketball, these guys are making so much money. Like this is part of the reason why the best player in the NHL makes, what your bench player makes in the NBA.
Worth noting, the rapport between Marty Walsh and Gary Bettman at this Four Nations tournament, honestly, it seems like the PA and the league are in a good spot right now as it pertains to just their relationship. And, I'm not going to call Gary Bettman blameless in everything that's gone on before because it takes two to tango. But it does appear that at least Marty Walsh has been a really good hire for the NHLPA. I mean, when it comes to international hockey agreements, you see the salary cap projections. They did mention that they haven't officially began on their new CBA talks, but they seem optimistic, both the league and the PA. So hopefully the future is brighter with collective bargaining in the NHL and the NHLPA. Bridget and Scott, Kim wants your opinions on who a better head coach is for younger players, Joe Sacco or Jim Montgomery. It seems that Monty, or under Sacco, I should say, that Lohrei and Poitras are getting some more trusted minutes, maybe a little bit more leash. How do you guys feel about that? Is that true?
I read this yesterday and I actually really had to think about it. Like for a while, I was trying to come up, like rack my brains, like think back to any interactions that would indicate that one was, less accepting of the younger players. But I do think what we have to separate is that Monty was here when they were younger and less polished, and like Sacco is here and they have a little bit more experience under their belt and they're a little bit further in their progression. So, and they also are dealing with injuries that, Lohrei is going to be in the lineup. It probably, like when Lindholm went out, that made his spot more solidified. And Poitras, after getting called up, has stuck around, and we've talked about it many times. They need him, and he's also had some development since then. So, in my opinion, I don't think either of them have more of a vendetta against the younger players than the other. And I just think maybe it's the circumstances that have surrounded when these guys have played. Their philosophies, I don't know, Scott, if you've heard the comments that they've made that are different, but I never got the sense that they were, that Montgomery was more apt to send people down or bench people than what Sacco would be if the circumstances were the same.
Yeah, well, and as I've said, like to reiterate, like it's also not the coach's decision who gets sent up and down. They might have a say, but those are ultimately Don Sweeney decisions. Yeah, I don't think Jim Montgomery disliked young players at all. I think he had a different way of dealing with them. And to me, I think what I notice as the biggest difference is Joe Sacco, and this might just be a product of where the team is and knowing that like they're kind of at a point where you have to give the kids more leash. But Joe Sacco seems to let young guys like Lohrei and Poitras play through mistakes more, where they're not going to get benched if they commit a bad turnover. He's more likely to just roll them right back out the next shift, play them the next game, But again, there are limits. Like he has healthy scratched Lohrei. Certainly early on when he took over, not as much recently. He's healthy scratched Johnny Beecher, another young player. But I think he is less punishing in terms of taking away ice time and more willing to give them a chance to bounce back on their next shift. Um, and I don't even know if I don't even really have a strong opinion as to whether either one is right or wrong, because I think Montgomery was always coaching even through those moments where it wasn't like right, like they weren't coming back to the bench after a mistake and Montgomery's like, go sit at the end and don't look at me. Like it wasn't like that. Like he would talk to them and then they'd break it down on video the next day. And like there was still ways to teach through it. But he did, especially in third periods of close games, he tended to take ice time away from young players. So that's where I think I noticed the biggest difference. But that doesn't mean that Montgomery didn't like those guys. It's just he was doing what he thought he needed to do to win games. I agree or disagree with the method.
Yeah, and for Joe Sacco to try to win games, especially in a stretch of hockey where Hampus Lindholm is still out of the lineup. There was a stretch where Charlie McAvoy simultaneously was out of the lineup. So who are you going to go to for on your back end to move the puck and be on the power play and play those minutes when you need a goal? It's going to be Mason Lohrei. And that's not because you're giving him more leash. It's because you needed him to step up. And I would say the same thing for Poitras. Like this Bruins team can't score, hasn't scored all year outside of David Pastrnak. So again, like if you're Joe Sacco, you're sitting there saying, well, Matt Poitras is one of the only guys that can probably help generate. So I'm going to play him, which is also kind of why you hear a lot of Bruins fans clamoring, give somebody down in Providence that's scoring at a good clip a chance, because nobody else in the big club, aside from a couple of guys, are doing anything. So it's not even like Cam Neely made the comment, are young guys coming up to Boston outscoring their mistakes? It's like, well, let's find out, because the guys in Boston haven't been, but that's a different conversation. So I don't think either one of the coaches in particular, favors the young kids more. I think they're pretty similar in how they've handled it. They're coaching for the situation in front of them, right? When Jim Montgomery was here earlier this year, it was still the first month and a half of the season, and Charlie McAvoy is still going to be your PP1 guy, and despite his struggles, the longer the season went along, he kept struggling. Joe Sacco said, "Okay, we're going to switch that up and put Lohrei there." So, but along the same in the same lane, Sam asks about Matt Poitras, and she says that she saw a stat that Poitras spent 10 minutes alongside Pastrnak and Geekie, and that the line produced 4 goals. She says she knows that Pastrnak, Geekie, Zacha have been on fire, but maybe put Poitras with Geekie and Zacha. And I would say
with Geekie and Pastrnak.
What did I say?
Zacha.
I'm sorry, Geekie and Pastrnak. And to that, I would say, I just don't think, kind of to the last question, that might be where you see Joe Sacco just not completely trust Matt Poitras in key defensive assignments against other teams' top players. Maybe. The other thing I would say about Poitras, because I think he's been really solid. I think he has had some quiet stretches and some learning curves. I would just say, loved his game against the Rangers, loved it against the Wild. I think this Bruins team has been so offensively invisible that we kind of are putting Poitras on a pedestal a little bit with some of his production in the assist cut. He's only got 1 goal in 26 games this year. And I'm not crucifying him for it, but it should be noted it's not and that goal came in November. So it's, he still has some, people are talking about him being a 1C or a 2C, and I get it. Like the options right now are Elias Lindholm, but it's just Poitras isn't exactly lighting the world on fire offensively either. So Zacha, I think, is more of a stable offensive producer in that spot right now.
Yeah, and it's also just it's the role and situation. So I looked it up to confirm the numbers, and it's 15 minutes that Poitras has played with Geekie and Pastrnak with 4 goals, which is great. But like you have to account for, okay, what is the situation where that line is being used? And we've talked about this. It's right after a penalty kill. They throw that line together because Pavel Zacha kills penalties. Geekie, Poitras, Pastrnak do not. So after they kill a penalty, or if they get scored on by the opposing team's power play, they roll with that line because it's like the 3 best offensive players who weren't part of the penalty kill.
Is that filtered
And
for 5-on-5, by the way, or is that all situations?
that's 5-on-5.
Okay.
Which I think is the only situation they.
I mean, there's a chance that sometimes they overlap on the power play only
True.
because Pasta plays both units and the other 2 are on the second unit.
Yeah, that's true. But also, like, so in those situations, you're also not facing the opponent's best line because the opponent's best players were just on the ice for the power play. So they're throwing out their 3rd or 4th line, and that Pasternak line with Poitras on it is feasting because that's a great matchup to take advantage of. If you elevate him to that first line full time, now you're going against first and second lines, top defensemen. You're getting defensive zone shifts. You're getting more faceoffs, which Sacco is better on faceoffs than Poitras, and his minutes are going up. Like if you're a first line center, you're playing 16 to 18 minutes. Right now, Poitras plays about 12 to 13. It's a big ask, and it's not one that I would be in a rush to throw him into. Like I think Matt Poitras is doing well as a 3rd line center with his 12 to 14 minutes, and you bump him up in those favorable situations. But I still think it would be a lot to ask for him to elevate into a first line center on a team that, whether we've given up on them from the outside, they still believe they can make a run at a playoff spot and try to do something this season.
Yeah.
This next question was from Jonathan. Jonathan, I believe it's very similar to Liz's question to start. He asked about the need to send Poitras to Providence during this 4 Nations break as opposed to letting him get some rest like all of his other teammates. And is there a double standard there? Bridget Scott, I do think we kind of answered that one. So maybe in the essence of time, we can move along. So Jonathan, thank you for the question. But for the answer, it was the first question that we answered. And I think the answer you'll find there.
It's so funny how many people send us how many, like the percentage of questions about Poitras in our mailbags is always higher than pretty much any other player consistently since he became a Bruin.
Yeah, and again, I would also just know, like, Poitras and Callahan are the only 2 players they could send to Providence. Everyone else would have had to go on waivers, so which they're not doing. So for those other guys, it's an NHLPA mandated break until they're able to get back on the ice as a team on Tuesday.
Yeah, and there was part of Kim's question was, why haven't they waived Wahlstrom yet? I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that, or
I don't know. I don't know why they really picked up in the first place. And as far, that's just I just can't get into Don's head there. Maybe he just likes the repetitive depth of bottom 6 forwards. I don't really know.
Well, the only thing I can think of is I wonder if you are planning on trading away a couple pieces. Okay, yeah, you're going to call up 1 or 2 guys from Providence, Merkulov, maybe Lysell, maybe Vinny Lettieri comes back, but you're still looking for guys who can fill out a roster if you trade away a Trent Frederick or Justin Brazeau and or Morgan Geekie. And so maybe you're not cutting ties with Wahlstrom just yet until you see what your lineup might look like post deadline. Look, obviously, like, Wahlstrom's got to produce some points at some point. Like he was brought here to add to the offense, and he really hasn't. I think he works hard for the most part. I've generally liked his effort most nights, but like if he's not contributing offensively, there's really just not enough else that he's doing.
All right, Joe comments, I feel a definite divide in the offseason set this Murphy's lost season in motion. Neely talked about a need for speed. They got bigger and slower players. Monty was on the last year of his deal. Swayman had a holdout with a predictable effect. Special teams coaching is bad. Carlo without Hampus Lindholm most of the season. Please comment. Thanks. Well, Joe, I appreciate that comment and that question. Bit all over the place. Maybe it's just moral of the story. It's been a perfect storm. It's fair to say that it's been a perfect storm, and I don't really know what we can really add to that, but it's yeah. So
yeah, like I feel like obviously we've kind of covered a lot of this throughout the year, but yeah, like Joe kind of summed it all up. It's like, yeah, they missed on their big off-season signings, at least in year one. Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov had not made the impact they had hoped for. You had guys coming to the season missing time during the summer. Pasternak has said he thinks it affected his start to the year. Marchand was recovering from surgeries, misses the first week of camp. Elias Lindholm suffers an injury in camp. Like Swayman's holdout. Yeah, you can call it excuses, or you can say it's just a bunch of reasons that all piled up and were kind of stacked against them out of the gate. Jim Montgomery's contract situation. Did he already kind of have a foot out the door? Was he not sure if he wanted to stay? Like, yeah, it all adds up to a place where you're starting slow and now you're trying to play catch up all season. And this team has not been able, like, they just straight up might not be good enough, but they've also been trying to play catch up, and that's really hard to do.
And Murphy's Law is anything bad that can happen will happen.
I think so. I didn't refresh on my laws, but based on how we use it, I'm assuming yes.
I thought it was something that Jimmy Murphy put into legislature. I don't really know.
Right? Isn't it anything bad that can happen?
Anything that can go wrong will go wrong.
Yeah, okay. So I try not to think about Murphy's Law, because then as a broadcaster, if you think that way, you're up Schitt's Creek without a paddle, and you're just like, crap, So we have to be optimistic about it. I do think a lot has gone wrong. So I get the reference for sure, because I think Swayman has gone worse than expected. Is playing worse than expected. I think the two guys that got brought in the two major moves in the offseason was Zadorov and Lindholm haven't worked out as expected either. Yeah, and maybe there was some things you were hopeful to see this season, like maybe Lysell made a jump, and that really hasn't happened either. But yeah, there's a lot that has gone wrong, and basically right now it's like Pasternak and Geeky are the positives, and then Poitras continuing to develop is good, but it's not like a huge impact as of right now. So yeah, I definitely get the comment.
All right, we're gonna finish off with a potential trade proposal from Don Sweeney. But before we get to him as the final question, I'm gonna combine three that all have to do with coaching. Okay, so we're gonna go with
what happened to our Dean Letourneau question?
Well, Dean, we actually did kind of go over last week. If we get time, we can do that one as well. But we have Mike on Twitter, on YouTube, NL Ryder, and on YouTube, Wheel6243 all asked similar questions. So I'll just fire through them real quick. Do you think there will be some changes or roles with the assistant coaches in the offseason? Power play, penalty kill has struggled this year. Also wonder why they didn't add an assistant coach when Sacco was promoted, leaving a vacancy. And then do you think the Bruins clean house with the coaching staff in the offseason? If so, does Gallant or Quenneville get the job? And should Sweeney be the first to go when they miss playoffs? And then the final person, need to ask, with so many players underperforming and so many of the same mental mistakes being made, is this Bruins team badly coached? So Bridget Scott, a lot to do with the coaching staff and their personnel in the offseason regarding poor special teams and just bad habits. How do you guys feel they will approach the offseason?
Yeah, I think these are all fair questions, and it's a big part of what Don Sweeney, Cam Neely, and company are going to have to figure out. Like, do they have the right coaching staff in place? Do they have 1-2 coaches they want to hang on to? Do they have someone outside the organization they identify that they want to pursue? The question about not bringing in another coach after Montgomery's firing is, I think we've asked that a few times, and like, I still wonder why they haven't. I mentioned before, but like maybe Zdeno Chara is part of that. He's coming on as some sort of advisor, and Don Sweeney told the Globe that he would help the coaching staff and players. So that sounds like more of an on ice role to me. But we still haven't seen that actually play out yet.
He's in a contract holdout like Swayman. They have the same agent.
Right. But yeah, it's a tough one. Like they're gonna have some tough decisions to make. I think, look, I think Joe Sacco is a pretty good coach, just like I think Jim Montgomery was a really good coach, but neither one has been able to find answers consistently with this team as it's constructed. And so management has to decide, like, well, is that just because we gave them a bad team and we put them in a bad spot? Or are they short on answers? Are they not creative enough? Are they not trying enough different things to solve problems? Like, all of that is on the table. I know we've talked about it a ton, but like the special teams in particular just being this bad all season long with seemingly, to my eye, like no signs of improvement is like pretty damning for the coaches.
Yeah.
Like, because we don't even really see personnel getting changed. It's like they just keep trying the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, no, I think there's going to be coaching changes in the offseason. I mean, the fact that the power play has looked as bad as it has, like, there's got to be a solution. Like, there's got to be multiple attempts to fix this situation, and part of that would be probably changing the coaches that are working on it, and also part of it is because they don't probably have the right pieces. And then, to one of the questions, like, is Sweeney the first to go when they don't make the playoffs? I have a hard time seeing him making it past that situation. I mean, I think that they might clean out coaches and Sweeney if they don't make the playoffs, and and it looks as bad as it has at different stretches of the season in the final 25 games here when you're supposed to be playing at your best.
Yeah, I think the Sweeney conversation probably needs a little bit more time on our end to really go over all that. But yeah, I would say I expect the Bruins to miss the playoffs, and I expect there to be some changes to the coaching staff as a result of it. Quickly, Candy, Dean Letourneau, I would just say slow and steady wins the race. Not much, he's getting some exposure, not a ton of production to speak of, but I think that's just going to be a project here.
I will note in the Beanpot final, he got moved up to BC's second line. Bruins prospect Oscar Jelvik, who usually plays in the top six, was out with an injury. They started the game with Letourneau in his usual fourth line spot. But as the game went on, Greg Brown decided to move him up. I thought he was playing pretty well. Obviously, Greg Brown did too. Still no points, still no goals. So at some point, the production does have to be there. But there are at least signs that he is playing better than he was in the first half.
Oh, there's signs that he's playing better than he was in January. Like when PC played BC and I had that weekend series, he didn't play much, and he only really played once the game started to get out of hand and they were giving some of the bottom six guys more ice time. And even in that, like, he was kind of a little bit uncoordinated looking. But both games of the Beanpot were probably his best two games of the season. And he started to get more shots on goal. He almost scored a few times. He had some really good chances that you're thinking were going to be his first goal. And I think he's been better in February. So, hey, maybe he's saving that first goal for the national championship game.
Maybe. Maria, when Lindholm comes back, probably Michael Callahan out, left shot down in Providence anyway. So that's probably the natural spot. Scott, I know you had a hard out. If you want to give it 2 minutes, we could finish this last one, or
I got a couple minutes. Yeah, we can get this last one.
All right. So this last question from Don Sweeney. He says, if I was on Twitter, if I was GM, the Pacioretty.
Is he not?
What?
He is the GM.
I thought so. I don't know why you have to clarify that. The Pacioretty for Suzuki trade.
He's just workshopping some trades. Wants to get some feedback before he actually pulls the trigger.
Yeah. That'd be so funny if this really was him the whole time.
The Pacioretty for Suzuki trade is my blueprint for the Bruins. Here's a comparable. Marchand to Tampa Bay for Connor Geekie. Add a little more if needed. Can't wait around for an Eichel 2.0, and they don't have the assets anyways. And Morgan Geekie and David Pastrnak are heating up. Thoughts? Basically, can you get something? Again, this Marchand conversation for me comes down to like, if the Bruins and Marchand are multiple years and multiple millions of dollars away, and you don't think he's going to be back next year anyway, then that's the only world where I think this is even a thing. Because everybody talks about you can't trade him. Well, you can trade him if you don't think he's going to be back next year. If they know that, it changes the conversation. If they think he'll be back, then I don't know if this trade scenario or anything like it would be realistic. But Bridget and Scott, your thoughts?
Yeah, I like the thinking. Like these are the kind of deals that Don Sweeney should be thinking about, is identifying, get draft picks, sure, prospects, sure, but also like young NHL ready players, like guys who are ready to play now and who can develop into core pieces. Like, I don't know if this trade in particular is realistic. Again, there's the Marchand aspect of it, of whether he's even going to get traded. And I don't know if Tampa would trade Connor Geekie for him. Like, he's one of their best young players. But yeah, like this is what you have to be looking at in a retool, because you don't just want to like accumulate a bunch of late first round picks or second round picks that turn into 3, 4, 5 year projects, because that kind of lends itself more to a rebuild. Like that's not helping you immediately get better next year and the year after. So it could be a deal like this, or the other one that I've laid out is what Washington did, which is you trade Dmitry Orlov for a first round pick. Then in the offseason, you trade that first round pick to get Rasmus Sandin. So you just got 10 years younger at left defense. All basically it becomes Dmitry Orlov for Rasmus Sandin. And was Sandin quite as good as Orlov at the moment? No, but he is now. Like now, Rasmus Sandin 2 years later is a legit top 4 defenseman. So those are the sort of moves you have to be looking at, where, ideally if you can get young guys who are going to be impact players for you in the next year or two, and not 3, 4, 5 years down the road, where it's even more of a wild card, because they might just not hit at all, and you might get nothing out of it.
All right. Bridget, any thoughts on that? Are you good to wrap up?
No, I know that we don't have a lot of time, and I think he covered it better than I could. So,
well, I don't know about better, but he did cover it. So good job, Scott.
I just rambled. I don't know if that means it was great coverage, but
yeah, no, the Martians. Scott's right. Like you have to consider everything, and for me, it just comes down to like if you think the players if you think the player's not going to be back next year, you really gotta make these hard choices. It's nothing personal, and everybody's like, oh, you can't ruin the culture. I got news for everybody. The Boston Bruins were around long before Brad Marchand and long after him, despite him being one of the best of all time. You have to do what's best for the organization if it makes sense. And if you don't think Brad Marchand's coming back next year and you don't think you're making the playoffs, you have to consider it. Thank you all so much for your questions. We appreciate them every single time. I think Bridget Scott, we actually got to all of them. So that's great. And enjoy Four Nations over the weekend. Enjoy your weekend. And the three of us will be back.
Sunday skate.
It's a Sunday skate. 9 a.m. 9 a.m. WEI. You can listen online. You can listen on the Odyssey app. Whole deal.
All righty. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll talk to you early next week. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.